Welcome to the Trade Setup. In this session, we will discuss some topics required to become a proficient trader. First, we'll go into discussing the charting software that's primarily used here at TradeSetup called TradingView. And then within the software itself, we're going to talk about some basic charting techniques. Um, Simply look for different types of support and resistance in horizontal support and resistance, diagonal, indicator based, and price gap. And towards the end, we will be doing a question answer based for all the live members that are here today. So to become a proficient trader, first we will go over TradingView, the primary charting software used for technical analysis. Um, the beauty of the software TradingView is that it allows you to access your charts from anywhere simply by using a web browser. And so in this example here, what we're going to do is open Safari or any web browser and simply go to tradingview.com. Here is tradingview.com. And in order to view any charts, you simply log in first into your account. And I hope you had the opportunity to create an account prior to this video. If not, please take the time to do so. And once you create an account, you have simply click this icon called charts. And it should bring up charts for any of the stock tickers that you would like to analyze. In this case, we've started off with a stock called Pinterest, ticker PIN. Pins, PINS. Um, and simply this trading software allows us to look at how the price has behaved over the course of time. So on the bottom axis, you have time, and on the right axis, you have the price. Now, on the left here, we have a certain number of tools that we use. Um, and the tools we're going to be primarily using today are the trend line tools located on the second icon. The other tools we're going to leave alone for now, and we'll talk about how to use them in later videos. On the top hand side, you will see a drop-down menu that will allow you to choose different time frames for your charts: 3-minute, 5-minute, 15-minute, and so on. For our charting purposes, we're primarily interested in the 5-minute, the 15-minute, the 1 hour, 4 hour, and the daily, okay, marked by these stars. And if you select the stars, it will come into your favorites. And so you can quickly switch between different time frames. An alternative solution is to simply come over to the layout, and you can select 2, 3, even different types of layouts you can put up. And within each layout, you can select different time frames. So you can have a 5-minute chart going on one side, and you can have a 1 hour chart going on the other side for the same stock. Um, For the time being, I am going to briefly go over my settings. Now, if you are new to TradingView, chances are that this is not what your TradingView looks like. You probably have the default layout where the chart's background is white, and you probably started off with the line function. And so the way to change that is simply come next to the time scale up here on top, select candles. These are what you want, from lines to candles. So that's what will happen once you select that option. Next, right click, go to settings. On the left hand tab, okay, we'll start going through each of these, so you can try to mimic my layout. Now, it's not absolutely necessary that you mimic my layout to have success. This is the layout I have. It's pleasing to my eyes, having to stare at the screen for so long. So you can choose the way you want it. So first thing, I have color bar based on previous close unchecked. I have the bodies and the wicks checked to green and red. I have not changed the colors. I've kept last price checked. The rest of these are unchecked, and extended hours, meaning the price movement that occurs after the market is closed will be highlighted in a background of orange and blue, as you can see back here. And I do have extended hours enabled. The time zone, you can select to whatever region you are. I'm located in Chicago, so that's where I have it set. Um, the status line, I wouldn't touch any of these. You can leave everything as it is. If these are not your default layouts, then you can make sure you can copy these. On the scale end, I have symbol last price labeled, and the selection is value according to scale. Um, the rest of these are unchecked. There's no overlapping labels, checked, and then countdown to bar closes checked, and as well as currency. And you can leave the remainder of these as they are. Appearance, here's where you can change the visual effect of what your chart looks like. So I'm not a big fan of the white background. I have mine set to black and solid. Um, then I turn the vertical grid lines. Usually they'll appear like this. You can hide them by just making them black as well. So overall, all you see are the candle bodies and the candle wicks of the price. Um, if you have a hard time of figuring out where one day ends and another day begins, you can select what's called the session breaks. And this will allow you to see one trading day at a time. And you can easily also turn that off by coming back into the appearance settings and unclicking it. The scale text, meaning the text that show up here and here, you need to change to either gray or white, or any light color that would contrast to the black background that we just changed to. And you can adjust the font that you like. My crosshairs are white now. Originally, the default layout has a white background, so you can't see white crosshairs on a white background. But now that we have a black background, my crosshairs are black, and I have the dashed line enabled. You can enable the watermark, and this basically allows you to see which stock that you're looking at. But it's not absolutely necessary. I find it a bit distracting when analyzing charts, so I have it disabled. In the navigations menu, I keep everything visible, same with the pane, and the top margin, bottom margin, and right margin values are listed here below. If they're any different, you can adjust them to what I have here. Next on the trading, I'm going to leave all of this alone. This should be all default settings. I have not adjusted any of these. And finally, in the events, we do want a few things enabled. We want to show dividends on the charts because these are very important days that show up for a company. And at times we get a lot of price movement. You want to show splits on the chart. You definitely want this enabled, which is earnings. Earnings are a very big catalyst that we try to look for. And usually during earnings times, we have either a price spike or a price drop. And it's important to understand what causes some of these price spikes if we're looking at some historical data. Additionally, you want the economic events on the chart showing, and you want future events showing. And then I've kept the event breaks adjusted to a pink line. And so that's where I have my settings placed. So now to adjust this chart, I'm going to apply a very common indicator called the moving average. And this is something I use almost every day. and I'll explain to you what it is. And in order to do that, simply click on the top where it says FX indicators and strategies. Okay. And then here you can just type in moving average. We want to select this one. And if you double click it, it will give you two different ones. And in a minute, I'll explain why we want two different moving averages. Um, Now, the moving average for any indicator that you add here will show up here on the top left corner. And to simply adjust the values of that moving average, you scroll over it and click the gears icon, which takes you to the settings. So for this moving average, we're gonna keep the color blue and make the thickness a little bit higher so we can see it against our background. And in the inputs, we are going to change the length to 50. Now, this is essentially saying that we are taking the average closing price of the last 50 days of this particular stock, and it's being modeled as a moving average or a line. And so when the next day comes in, the first day of the first 50 days will be removed and the new day will be added. And so the moving average is fluid. It continuously takes the last 50 days uh, as an average, and it gives a lot of indications as to which way the price is moving, whether we're in a bearish or bull market. Okay, and I'm simply going to click close. For the second moving average, I'm going to again click the gears icon and change this length to 200. So like before, this one will now take the moving average of the last 200 days. And there it is, there it shows up. I am going to change the color here to green and increase the thickness of the line so it's easily visible on the black background. And we will click OK. As far as other indicators go, we will discuss on how to add them, how to read them at a later time. But for the purpose of this session, this is all we're going to need for the time being. So let's get back to our PowerPoint and I will start discussing what we're going to talk about next. I want to make sure. Okay. So that was the TradingView software. Now we're going to start digging into doing some actual technical analysis, some basic charting techniques. The most common and fundamental charting technique that is universal to all types of technical analysts is identifying what's known as support and resistance for a stock. And these are simply areas of supply and demand. And they're known for their support and resistance because they tell a story about the price. Support and resistance are like significant actionable levels, you know, where places where traders can either buy or sell. And then we'll go into a little bit deeper into different types of support and resistance. We'll define what they are, and then we'll go into a chart and start identifying practically how you can identify some of these. And then how you can use them to make a game plan on whether you want to enter long, whether you want to buy a stock, or whether you should sell a stock simply based on how the charts look and where the support and resistance are located. So let's get into it. Support are levels that are low. So lows are known as the support levels. And the next slide, I will actually show you an image of how to identify a support level. These are areas where demand starts to increase, and it's usually where investors are more willing to buy. You can think of support like a floor. It supports the price from going lower. Conversely, highs are known as the resistance level. This is where the area where supply starts to increase. and where investors are more willing to sell the stock. And you can think of resistance like a ceiling. It resists the price from going higher. And usually what happens is the price will reach a resistance level, it will stop, and it turns down. Um, the one key note to make about this is support and resistance isn't usually one specific price. It's not a static number. You need to think of support and resistance in terms of a zone. It's a price range. Uh, so in the example we're going to show later, we'll identify a range for a support range and a a resistance range. So let's first talk about different types of support and resistance. There's the very common support and resistance known as horizontal support and resistance. Um, these you will see very common in any type of technical analysis. And as technical traders, we often project the future price movement by drawing these horizontal support and resistance levels. These are areas of resistance from months ago, and they can act as support at a later time, and old support can act as new resistance. So before we jump into the other ones, let's just go through what a horizontal support and resistance would look like. So here is a chart of Pinterest. And what we notice here is as time passes from left to right, the price moves up and it doesn't seem to cross a certain threshold. This is our ceiling. This is where the horizontal resistance is. It comes into this resistance area, it turns around and comes back down. But notice that the price never goes below the horizontal support area. Now, the more times the price comes and touches the horizontal support, the more it validates that area as a support. And the stronger this area becomes for buyers to come in and buy the stock at that particular price. On the top end, equally the top end, every time the price comes and touches the horizontal resistance, the stronger that resistance becomes and the harder it is for that price level to break, simply because the buyers are here and the sellers are selling here. Okay, so you can think of this as the horizontal support as like a floor of a house. You're not going to go below it, and if you do, then we're going to go even lower. And as far as the ceiling goes, you can think of that as the horizontal resistance. So now I'm going to switch to the TradingView chart for Pinterest. And here's how we're going to identify a horizontal support and resistance. So I am here on the 4-hour chart. And I can see simply by looking through the chart right now that here is an area that Pinterest is having a hard time breaking in the past. So I will simply take my cursor and select a diagonal trend line, okay? And I am going to select this area as a resistance area. Now, in the example I showed, and what I said earlier is that you cannot keep this as a static number. We can't say that this is it. This is the final number. If anything, it will only touch here and it will only come back. No, we have to think of this as an area of resistance. And so the way I'm drawing this is you can come into this tool. Actually, here you can come into this tool and select price range. And once you select price range, you can click and drag up and it will create what's known as a zone. You can adjust the colors by coming into the menu here, and we'll simply color this red just to indicate that it is a resistance area. And next we will create a support And we can see that the price it tends to bounce here. Generally, it seems to be bouncing right here. So we're going to change the color of that line to green to indicate that we are in a support area and that we can buy if the price comes in that range. In the same way, we are going to generally keep a price range or a range for a support and change that to a green, same color. And that is simply your horizontal resistance, your horizontal support. And you notice that the price tends to just fluctuate between these two levels. Now, the one thing to notice here is, notice how in this time, from December 1st to December 28th, that the $67 range for Pinterest is acting as a support. Now, what's interesting is before that, if we were to continue this horizontal support line, you notice that it actually acted as resistance before, back in October of 28 October. The price spiked to that level and rejected. And again, it came up and it rejected. So if we were a little bit back in time, we would mark this area as resistance. And so this resistance turned into a support area in the future. And so that is a key fundamental thing to understand, is that support and resistance are dynamic, they're fluid, they need to change. They are not always going to remain as resistance, or they're not always going to remain as support. And so, for example, if the price, let's say, were to come down below this support level and try to come back up again, it's going to have a hard time breaking through this, because now this support level will act as resistance, just like it did in the past. Okay, so now let's switch back to our PowerPoint. We're going to look at a different type of support and resistance. So the next one we're going to look at is what's known as diagonal support and diagonal resistance. This is simply trying to chart your higher lows and your higher highs on an uptrend, or your lower lows or your lower highs on a downtrend. And simply by doing this, you create what's known as parallel channels, or parallel diagonal lines. And this creates what's called a price channel. And the price will tend to go up, but it will fluctuate within this channel. So the reason it's called diagonal, well, simply because now the lines are moving diagonal. Before this, we were talking horizontal. That's because the price seemed to be consolidating, meaning it was just trading sideways and kind of bouncing up and down between our top and bottom horizontal resistance and support. Here, the price is moving up steadily. However, it's still following the same pathway where it's bouncing up and down between the diagonal resistance and diagonal support. And so we're going to switch back to TradingView, and let's look at how to identify this kind of trend. Okay, so here in TradingView, what I'm going to do is first I'm going to clear all my drawings so we can start fresh. And you can see that in the 4-hour, I am going to actually also hide my moving averages for now, just to keep things clear. You can identify this uptrend by simply drawing a line and trying to attach or make it touch as many points as possible along the way, many lows as possible. So we have 1 touch, 2, 3, 4, 5. The more touches you can get, the stronger that trend line is. And then on the top end, we will see what the resistance is from breaking out. And I'm going to turn that style to red to indicate that it is a resistance. And so we can see generally that the stock is moving up. Uh, Even though we have some down days, the overall trend of the stock is up. Um, any break below this line, we would think that that is bearish because generally speaking, the stock has been trending up since November 10th. If we were to just look at our price range or where we drew our trends, uh, the stock price is increasing over time from November 10th to December. And so any break below the support line, we are headed down. As long as we stay above this line and within this channel, we can continue to expect the same trend. And this is where most of the traders or technical analysts trade, as they are trend traders. They want to see the trend to continue, and they will basically hop in to ride the trend until that trend is no longer true. So in this case, we are seeing an uptrend. When this uptrend breaks in a way where the price breaks out of this channel that we have formed, this uptrend is no longer true. And at that time, a person in a position would likely exit. Okay, now I am going to remove all the drawings once again to clear. And let's go back to our PowerPoint and continue to the next one. Now, in the next area, way to identify support and resistance is to simply look at indicators. Now, there are a lot of indicators out there, and you can use these indicators to identify different types of support and resistance. But for our example, we're going to keep it very simple, very practical, and we're going to plot the 50 and 200 moving average. Now, a little earlier, we already started doing that, but just to show you the concept of why we're doing this is notice that the blue line, which is our 50 moving average, tends to act as support as the price moves up. Um, every time the price comes into contact with the 50 moving average, it bounces, it bounces, it bounces. Here, yes, we broke below, but again, we are not looking at a static number. Your support and resistance in every case should be very fluid. It needs to be dynamic. It has to be a range. It cannot be a static number. And so overall, uh, a moving average that is trending up tells us that we are in a bull market, or we are actually trending up and there are more buyers than sellers. And so the stock price will likely continue to increase until the support of the 50 moving average breaks, in which case we have now broken the uptrend and we could start seeing a sell-off. The same thing applies with the 200 moving average, which is much slower than the 50, since it takes into account 200 days worth of closing price data as an average versus the 50. So it tends to lag a little bit behind. Well, not lag per se, but because it has a lot more data points on it, the average is technically a little bit lower than the 50 moving average. And we'll go back to our TradingView chart. Okay. And as you can see that once we have, we entered the moving average indicator, and we can access it through this little drop-down menu on the top left. And I am simply going to click the I button to unhide it. And this is what we are seeing. It's the same as the picture that I showed in the PowerPoint. And simply what we're seeing is that the 50 moving average is acting as support as an indicator and telling us that Pinterest is trending higher and higher. Okay, so until this trend or the stock breaks below the 50, we are still considered to be in a bull market as far as the stock is concerned. Okay, and then finally, the last um, type of support and resistance we're going to talk about is price gaps. Now, usually price gaps will occur in a time of very extreme supply or demand, meaning they tend to occur after hours when you have earnings news. Let's say, for example, if we have great earnings news, a stock tends to gap up, meaning it opens much higher than the previous day, creating this empty gap, if you will, on the chart. And the gap basically is signifying that there's a flood of orders hitting the market before the market opens. So in this example, we're still looking at Pinterest, but you can see that during the earnings signified by the E, overnight, the price went from this $52 range all the way to the $60, $64 range overnight. And so we have this nice big gap area. And these tend to serve as support. As you can see that the next day when the price opened this high after Pinterest did their earnings, the stock sold off, came back up, then sold off again, but it never crossed below the initial gap, and it's acting as support. Now, on the flip side, if we were to gap down and try to come back up, the gap would act as an area of resistance. Now, because we gapped up, this is an area of support. If there was bad earnings news and we try to come back up, that gap would act as resistance. And so I'm going to stop here as far as our this session goes. We talked about the charting software, TradingView. We'll discuss a little bit more about different types of indicators you can use. We talked about the basic charting techniques of identifying and defining different types of support and resistance. And now we'll take some question and answers, or you guys can do some questions. I'll try to answer. We have other analysts on the line that can also help provide more insight. Again, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next video.